and our weekly video segment to take you into the back shelves of your local video store, back where it says horror videos, and where kids are devouring some awful films that we call the video nasties.
Are you freebasing? Inquiring minds want to know.
I have to break free from this culture of mechanical reproductions and the thick incrustations dying on the surface.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
Mom with the new flesh.
The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, come with me and be immortal.
We have such sights to show you.
Gotta return some videotapes.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to the It Slays podcast. I'm your humble host, Rowan.
And I'm your digital Zoom, Mike.
And last but not least, it's Colton.
And it is another episode of The Boys! And that's where I insert my The Boys sound. We are Jillis. She is everyone's going on vacation in the summer. What is wrong with you people?
I think this is just pettiness on the part of Jill, where I skipped out on her episode, so now she's going to skip out on mine.
It must be. Jill's on vacation. She's actually in my province, Nova Scotia. I think she was in Newfoundland. But that's all right. I got to see her yesterday. We went and saw a movie, so all is good on that front. So she's left us. She said, I know this is just going to be a banger episode, so I'll let the fellas deal with this one. So let's start off with, what have we been consuming? What have you been watching? What have you been reading? What have you been listening to? Colton, you weren't here last episode, so let's start with you.
Well, listen, it's way too much to go over if I'm going to recount what I've been watching for the past month. But, over the last couple of weeks, I think it's only appropriate to start with the biggest, the loudest, the bleakest thing in theaters right now. Half of the cultural phenomenon known as Barbenheimer. That's Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, which I thought was pretty great. As per usual, Hoyt van Hoytema's cinematography was stunning. Ludwig Göransson's score is his best yet, which might be a hot take because I think he won an Oscar for Black Panther. But just personally, I don't remember the Black Panther score so much, and obviously maybe it's just recency bias, but I thought this score was amazing. And it's also masterfully edited by Jennifer Lame, who somehow makes a 3-hour historical biopic flyby, which, is a feat in and of itself. And even with all the technicals kind of being on point for this movie, it would fall flat on its face if it had a lesser cast. And thankfully, all of the 30 plus recognizable actors in this movie bring their A game. This movie literally has Oscar winners featured for a minute. There's an Oscar winner in this movie that I think they have 3 scenes, and for the first 2 scenes during the movie they have no words. They're just literally in the background doing nothing. That I was just bro, did you really get an Oscar winner in here to do nothing? To have a couple of days as a background actor. But Robert Downey Jr. and Cillian Murphy, they're particularly excellent throughout the movie. They're kind of what you'd call probably the leads or co-leads of the movie. And then Emily Blunt actually has a particularly scathing scene that I think nearly entirely steals the movie. It's a really good scene. That being said, I do think the movie probably takes about 40 minutes to, get going. Nolan obviously overcomplicates what should be a pretty straightforward first act, especially for a biopic, but he just has to, have all these intersecting timelines and multiple narratives and all this shit. It's a little bit much. And then he also kind of takes some artsier stylistic choices that I felt really out of place, considering the subject matter and considering, once again, this is supposed to be nonfiction biopic. And those artsier choices also wind up falling by the wayside, once the movie hits its stride. So it's very strange. It's an hour of weird choices, and then he just pivots and they don't really ever come up again. So it's just I didn't like them and it rubbed me the wrong way, but then they just didn't come up anymore. So it's okay, cool, Nolan. Also, I'm sad to report that he still has a problem with writing women. It's a step up, I would say, from some of his recent films, but you still have really great actresses such as Florence Pugh, who, wind up being a casualty of his underwritten screenplay. She doesn't really have too much to do here. So yeah, it's overall not a slam dunk for me. It's not a masterpiece, as some people are calling it, in my opinion, but I think it's well worth seeing in theaters. And also, just for our listeners, there's a scene in the movie that is straight up psychological horror nightmare, and nice. It kicks ass. It's a really good scene. It's my favorite scene of the entire movie. So once you've seen it, you'll know what scene I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it already, maybe check it out. It's not something necessarily that I think you have to see in IMAX, weirdly enough. It's a lot of
That's
just
what
people
I like
talking
to hear.
in rooms.
That is what I like to hear.
I know you asked me ahead of time if you have to see it in IMAX. I was like, yes, it's a Nolan movie. Probably 70% of the movie is probably shot on IMAX, cameras. But it is largely just a lot of people talking in rooms. Obviously, there's some key moments, like obviously the testing of the atomic bomb is probably a pretty crazy scene that you should probably see in IMAX, but it's a very talky movie. It's not actually, it's not something that demands to be seen on the largest screen possible outside of a couple of choice scenes is probably what I'd say.
So you tell me I should watch it on my phone screen.
Yeah, get out your iPod Nano or whatever people
iPod video.
Yeah, they always do like those memes of like, oh yeah, just as Nolan wanted, watching it on like the Game Boy Color, But yeah, next up I saw was the other half of Barbenheimer, which is Barbie, which although it's an incredibly different movie than Oppenheimer, I actually believe it's quite great in its own right as well. Greta Gerwig creates something that feels like it's straight out of the mid-2000s to me. Like it's something that could have come out at the same time as like Herbie Fully Loaded or like The Cat in the Hat, with its like weird stylistic trappings and like how cheesy it inherently is. But it also finds a way to kind of ground itself by incorporating like modern socio-political issues and also kind of toying with and even breaking kind of like its own filmic language. Like it's a really weird and out there movie. And obviously like I'm tiptoeing around spoilers here, but I like my sold out audience, despite how weird it gets, like they completely ate it up. Like they were just all dressed in pink. They were absolutely like cheering and devouring Barbie. They absolutely loved it. So the fact that like something this weird is so successful this day and age, it kind of filled me with a little bit of hope that hopefully the future of blockbuster filmmaking can still have a strong directorial voice, because obviously when it comes to other blockbusters like the MCU and stuff, we're very much used to basically them chewing up all these young and upcoming directors and basically they all feel the same. This very much still feels like a Greta Gerwig movie to me. Outside of that, I think Margot Robbie was born to play this role. She's like so talented and obviously so gorgeous, so easy to watch on screen. But I would actually argue that I think Ryan Gosling kind of steals the show. I'm going to throw it off to Rowan here in a minute because I know he's a big Gosling fan. But yeah, it was just, I absolutely loved him in this movie. Anyways, I think everyone should go check it out or do the double feature. Either way, it's a lot of fun. But try and see it in a packed house. Like when I saw it, I had two women kind of my own age that were like clapping at all the little like, sideways remarks towards men. Like they were absolutely like cheering and hooting and hollering. And then on my left, I literally had like a mother, two daughters, and her husband that was like, she was trying to explain all the sexual innuendos to her kids in a way that wouldn't like out the innuendo. It was an interesting experience that I think it completely elevated the experience, just how much people loved it. Yeah. Rowan, I know you also saw Barbie. What do you think of it?
Yeah, me and Exilia went and saw it. I really enjoyed it. I think I liked it more than Exilia ended up liking it. But wow. Yeah, I thought it was really good. It was interesting, especially running as like kind of, marketed almost as a kid's movie. Because, we're so used to like Pixar, stuff like that, has stuff for the adults but, it still keeps it for the kids, where this is I was very confused because other than it being so colorful and, kind of the stuff about Barbie, like Barbie Land, all this stuff, I was like, most of this I don't think any kid would understand. Like, super socio-political, like, they just keep referencing, like, stuff about the patriarchy all the time. And I mean, great on it so that you can explain to your kids what the patriarchy is. Yeah. But I think you said the right thing. Margot Robbie, like, born to play this. But yeah, Ryan Gosling, just fantastic. Born to play Ken. It was just, he was so good. And, it's kind of funny because as someone that like kind of started his career, I don't know if you guys remember, what was it? It was called like Breaker High or whatever. Which is like this teen comedy, dramedy thing. So I always kind of forget that Ryan Gosling does, have a pretty good sense of humor. He's not just in reffing films, not saying anything under neon lights. He can wear neon and say funny things.
Yeah, I mean, he was particularly great in The Nice Guys as well. Like, the guy actually does have a really good comedic sense to them.
Yeah, but I like you said, I mean, I don't really want to. This is one I feel that no one should spoil for a while. You should just go see it. But it's an experience. Auxilia wore, Auxilia wore pink pants and got her hair in buns, and we went there. Everyone's in pink that was watching it. So I think except for me, that was just wearing some like horror T-shirt or something.
Lame.
I know, super lame. Yeah. Did you have anything else, Colton? Or
yeah, I mean, lastly, I'll just mention Talk to Me. I have to. And by the time you're listening to this, you likely already heard our now slaying on it. But I have to quickly say on the main show that I absolutely loved it. In my opinion, I think it's the best horror film since Nope last summer, and probably the best A24 horror release since The Lighthouse. And although it's not without its flaws, I'm incredibly excited to see what the directing duo known as Raka Raka does next. So yeah, it's not a hot take. I mean, everyone's been kind of eating this movie up, and I know Rowan's seen it, and he'll probably have a couple of things to say about it when I toss it to him. But yeah, go see it. I very much enjoyed Talk to Me. Outside of that, I've seen a couple of things. I rewatched Saw, which holds up, even though it's hilariously kind of almost quaint nowadays in this, horror landscape. And I watched Wes Craven's New Nightmare for the first time. I've never seen it before. And I did enjoy it. I thought it was pretty good. It felt kind of like a prototypical Scream to me. Like it almost seemed like too meta, where it kind of bogged the movie down a little bit, where Scream kind of struck a balance of being meta and commenting on horror films, but also having a little bit more of a kind of like a narrative thrust to it. Like I was just so interested on like how the actors were playing themselves, and they were actually talking to the real producers in the movie and go to the real studios, and Wes Craven's in there writing the screenplay as we're watching it. It was just such a bizarre movie. Like definitely far ahead of its time for sure. But yeah, I liked it. It's just compared to all the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies, it was very different for sure. Like, I mean, it was like a 2-hour movie that, I don't know, Freddy was barely in it, like, half hour maybe at the end, but yeah.
Yeah, but you get full on Heather Langenkamp for the whole
movie,
I'm
not saying it was bad. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It was just very different than what I was expecting. What people kind of told me about New Nightmare is saying like, oh, it's like I heard a lot of people say it was like a reboot or a re-envisioning of the franchise and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is just like really very much about the franchise itself and about horror films and franchises. And, it was super meta. It was just way more meta than I was expecting, which, I was caught off guard and I still enjoyed. I thought it was good. I took a lot of those ideas that he was kind of fighting with in that movie and made him, kind of condensed them all and picked through it and made Scream, which I thought was a little bit more successful. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I've been mostly consuming. Mike, what about you?
Honestly, not a lot.
Not again, Mike.
A lot of trash. Listen, this is like summertime. I completely check my brain out. I see, the funny thing is I have a plan to rewatch all of the Saw movies. Because I saw the trailer for the new one today while I was at work, and it looks really good. I'm not gonna lie, and I haven't said that about a Saw movie since like part 2. So I'm looking forward to talking about that next episode, but we'll see. I rewatched an old classic favorite of mine, Easy A, which was like again a nice check my brain out, like just like makes me feel good movie, and I just it made me like really miss that like 2000s kind of like era of like all those like actresses emerging, like Lindsay and Emma and the Hillary era and all that, and I was just like just got me like feeling a certain kind of way. So yeah, that was like I know that's gonna kickstart another rewatching spree of like all the old like 2000s kind of like girl fronted teen rom-coms and ranch-coms and all those. So
I love that.
I was gonna say I feel like we don't really get nearly as many of those as we used to. Like
no,
I feel like it was every couple of weeks there would be a new one of those in video stores, and now it's like you probably get 1 or 2, I don't know, of those sorts of movies a year, and they're not even like in the same vein. Like they did a really good job of showing like how mean teenagers can be and how that. I don't know. You don't really see that too often anymore.
No, and it's weird because it's like I was thinking that when I was watching it. I'm like, this is the perfect type of thing that you could pump out now. Because like it doesn't cost a lot of money. Like the cast was insane. Like everybody in it was just like somebody who is, like nominated for Oscars and shit. But like also a couple of like just charismatic teens who, you know, you could not have to pay, you know, $10 million to or whatever. It's like you could easily make this as like a nice antidote to your Oppenheimers and your Marvel movies and all that shit. It's like, you know, bloated and financially and all that shit. And it's just like, why aren't they making more of them? And like, it's not like youngsters don't watch movies. Like, they still do, you know what I mean? It's just so weird. Like, it would be a good excuse to get them in the theaters. Like,
I feel like the big issue is that those usually go to like Netflix now, and they usually suck. Like, they're usually things that
no, it's true.
Just
You're
aren't
right.
Developed enough to go to the theater.
But again, like, you could take your Netflix budget and make the same movie and like throw it out theatrically for like 3 weeks and probably make way more money than you would having it on streaming.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I'm with
you know,
Mike
like
as well.
you need like, and it's like a going out with your friends style thing or like a date thing. You know what I mean? It's like there's just like you said, there's nothing really like that anymore. Like maybe a couple times a year, and it's like they're just non-events. And I just kept thinking how like all of those type of movies they're not, you know, these things with like some massive like cultural impact, but like they really do. Like the shit from them, like, you know, scenes and sayings or like songs from the soundtrack would like seep into the popular culture for like years afterwards. And it's just like everybody would know those references, you know, and it wasn't like, you know, it's just like I feel like we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
You're totally right. And like watching that, it was just like it really made me miss that era. And I'm just like, there's something I think missing that we maybe could like go back and take a page from that era's book. I'm just saying, you know, maybe that would get me back in theaters again. I love that type of movie.
Mm-hmm.
Give me some like lightweight fluff. I mean, other than that, I watched a season of Drag Race, of course, that I had missed. UK versus the World. It was phenomenal. And I watched a couple shitty TV movies on Tubi.
Good job.
Like, honestly, Tubi is just everything right now.
God.
I've been making my Tubi list. It's like literally like 400 things long right now. I've probably fully 10% of Tubi's library like queued up.
As you should.
And yeah, and it's just like, and I'll be scrolling through like their suggestions for stuff and just going like, oh my god, this movie's wild. Like I remember this coming on TV in like 1999 or something, and then I'm like, I gotta add it to my list, and it's like already on list. Like, okay, cool. So I've just fully added, like, literally gone into fugue states or, like, when I'm drinking or something and just fully added, like, everything on Tubi to my list. So, yeah, bro, what about you? You've like, consumed way more than I have.
I've been a busy boy. It's been, like, weird because we didn't have any, like, Now Slayings coming up, and I edited all, like, our episodes that came out really early, so I basically had, like, 2 weeks off of editing. So I was like, you know, I gotta take advantage. So I'm gonna start with something I normally don't, is I actually watch some television. Yeah, usually I just get frustrated. I'm like, I don't have time for television. There's too many movies. But I was like, you know what? I got this time. So me and Exilia have been watching The Righteous Gemstones, which is like Jodie Hill, Danny McBride, David Gordon Green. They do a bunch of HBO shows. So we're caught up on that. It's fantastic. If you're not watching that, it's like one of the funniest HBO shows. Adam Devine stars in it. It's just kind of usual suspects that Danny McBride has in his productions. And then on that, since we caught up with that, we started watching Vice Principals, which is the show they did before Righteous Gemstones. So we're a couple episodes into that and have really been enjoying it. I've been playing catch up on Curb Your Enthusiasm and Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which are both equally great. I've really been enjoying Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I just watched an episode where they mimic like sitcom clip episodes where they just like reminisce. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Except everything they reminisce comes back into their present reality, and it's just like this meta commentary on clips, and it's just, I mean, Always Sunny is always really funny. Me and Exilia are finishing up I Am a Stalker on Netflix. Which is, you know, more of this Netflix true crime. It's just a series where I think it's 8 episodes long. I think we're on like the 7th episode, but they basically just take stalking cases and they actually interview the person that was like arrested and is in prison or whatever for stalking, and like basically how it got to that point. Obviously, you know, no surprise, most of these people like don't think they're stalkers, but it's been kind of interesting, you know. It's just kind of television that you can sit there and I can play like Monopoly on my phone and then also watch it. Probably the big watch that I don't think any of the world enjoyed except for me and my cousin, but it was kind of like a family thing because we kept texting each other, is I watched and finished Secret Invasion on Disney.
Okay.
Which I know the world hated. I thought this was probably the best show they've done since WandaVision.
It's like the only thing they've put out in years that I was like, I'm kind of half interested in this.
It's very much in the heart of like Winter Soldier, where, you know, even though you're dealing with like the Skrull stuff, it's just more of an action show than it is like a superhero show. Like, obviously, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury is like the front runner for this. So, you know, it's not necessarily so super powered. It's more like, you know, we're in Russia and guys with machine guns and we're doing like spy stuff. And as someone that's always voiced that like Winter Soldier is, I still think, the best MCU movie. Like, that's always been my favorite one. I've just really liked this one. And like I said, do I think that realistically it's probably the best? Probably not. But it's been fun, like I said, because my cousin's been watching it, and he's been loving it, like, watching each episode, like, 3 times to get all the Easter eggs. So it's been fun just, like, texting back and forth and being like, oh, what does this mean for future movies or past movies or anything like that. And, you know, Samuel L. Jackson, like, I don't think he ever gives you a bad performance, so it's been pretty good. I've been enjoying it. And then on the movie side,
Rowan.
Yeah.
I just want to, just out of my personal interest, you mentioned Beef last time on the podcast, that you were watching Beef. Did you finish it? How was it afterwards?
I did finish it. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely.
Okay, I still haven't checked it out yet. I've had it on my to watch list downloaded for ages now, and it's just I just haven't checked it out yet.
I guess that's how I forgot that I didn't finish it last time I had mentioned it. Yeah, me and Exili finished it pretty much the next day, probably after I recorded.
Oh, okay.
And
nice.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Like, it's probably one of the best things that has been on Netflix for shows. Just, you know, I don't know, is it because it's A24 that it's just like a little better done? I'm sure Colton would say yes. But yeah, it was definitely super interesting, and I'd definitely be interested to see any other A24 like shows that they try to develop like that.
Well, you should watch The Idol on HBO, the other A24
yeah,
show.
I've only heard bad things, so I'm scared to watch it.
Yeah, don't watch it, actually. It's super cringe. I watched the first episode, and probably don't watch that one. Anyways, go on with your movies, Rowan. I had to ask about Beef.
Oh, it's okay. So movies that I'm really not going to say anything about. I watched Double Take, which is a Eddie Griffin movie from like 2000. It's not good. I rewatched Palm Springs, which I enjoyed when I first watched it. I enjoyed it on a second watch. I rewatched The Invitation, not the shitty new one, but the one this podcast loves. And
yes.
It's still a banger. It's still a banger. For some weird reason, I watched The Outlaws, which is the new Happy Madison produced movie on Netflix that stars Adam Devine from Workaholics. That's why I was interested. Okay. It's him and Pierce Brosnan. And, you know, it's exactly what Adam Sandler has been producing for Netflix. Just like, what are like
garbage?
Super simple garbage. It's about a guy who meets his in-laws, and his in-laws are bank robbers, and they rob a bank he works at, and the silliness that ensues, it just wasn't good. I also finally, I bought it like 3 years ago and never watched it. I got to watch the DC animated Superman Red Son, which was not very good. I'm usually a big proponent of the DC animated universe, and this is a story that you should probably read and not watch. It's only like an hour and a half long or something, and maybe only an hour and 20, and Red Sun is just such like a rich and complicated text that they basically just like cut anything out of it that was thought-provoking, and it just turned into like a typical like Yay for America movie, and like this is why communism sucks. So just read it. It wasn't very good. I actually, for some reason, I've been on like a documentary kick. I've been watching like a couple documentaries. So I watched for In Search of the Last Action Heroes, which is the same company that does the In Search for Darkness on Shudder about horror movies. This came out in 2019, but that was only in the UK. It just now got a US release. It's on Tubi, actually. It's about 2.5 hours long, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about action movies from the 80s and 90s, and just kind of all the direct-to-video stuff, as well as the mainstream Schwarzenegger, Stallone stuff.
Is Cynthia Rothrock in it?
Yes, she's all.
Oh, okay.
All
I was like, that's literally the only reason I'd watch it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, unfortunately, they don't get any interviews with Stallone or like anybody that's big. And even the directors, like they're only really securing interviews from like -C directors that did like really low grade action stuff. But it's very interesting to get interviews from kind of like guys that were in all these big Schwarzenegger movies that just played like bad guy background people, but were in like all of the movies. So if you're in that kind of stuff, it was super interesting. One thing that really surprised me on Shudder just put out a documentary called Sharksploitation, which is just
I heard good things about this one.
It is fantastic. I gave 5 stars on Letterboxd, which I don't. Wow. Normally I just give documentaries 4 or 5 because I'm like, how do you rate a documentary really? But this was fantastic because it gave me more than I expected. I expected it to be about Jaws and how that turns into Sharknado and all this stuff, but a lot of it is actually just like how humans have portrayed sharks going back to like pictures on cave walls and like
cool. Okay.
Just throughout media, whether it's literature or visual. But in it gave me a lot of things to watch, like just shark movies I didn't know about, especially ones that kind of ripped off Jaws but may have been like direct to video or just very underground. So it was just really interesting to see. They had like some great interviews, especially with like more modern people. So like, I can't think of his name, but like the guy that directed like the Uncaged movies that came out a little while ago that have been reviewed pretty good, all the way to like stuff like, the Black Demon that just came out like direct to video. I think it's on Tubi now. And they also interviewed, I messaged Jill right away, a guy named Mark Polonia that directed a little movie called Sharkula, which was, I felt bad, man. We trashed that movie so much, and he seemed so nice. And this guy has made like 150 direct-to-Tubi shark movies.
I'm sure you not liking one of them is not making him lose any sleep.
But he was fantastic. But yeah, just watch it. It's super interesting. And a lot of stuff just about sharks in general. If you're into like nature stuff, they interview a lot of like marine biologists and stuff that talk about misconceptions about sharks that were caused by Jaws and by
does it get into the shark fin trade and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, all that kind
of a downer.
That kind of stuff. There's a lot of downer stuff in it, not just like happy-go-lucky stuff. I'll keep it on Shudder for a sec. I finally got a chance to watch Resurrection, which has been on my
Rebecca
watch.
Hall movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, usually when I watch a horror movie, I don't like say much on here in case for some reason it gets picked, which I mean, very well, this could at some point. I really enjoyed it. Rebecca Hall, just, if she could win like an underground Oscar award for just always killing it and everything she's in, she would win that because she was fantastic in it. Tim Roth was fantastic in it. Just like a great psychological horror that gets really trippy at the end of it, and I really enjoyed that. I went back a little bit. I finally saw Shiva Baby, which has been on my list since I saw Bodies, 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 and I think every podcast I listened to about that was like, everyone's gonna go watch Shiva Baby. Netflix finally got it.
Yeah, I really want to see it.
So
it's also something that we could probably review
oh
on the
my
show,
God,
considering how horrific it is.
I said the most non-horror, like the most horror movie a non-horror movie has ever been. And if you follow me on Letterboxd, you know I loved it. I give 4.5 stars, better than Jaws.
Wow.
I said the only movie, not that this movie is also a 4.5 star movie, but it's the only movie other than Fall, that movie that came out the other year about heights, I was literally just like sweating, my eyes were covered, like the cringe, just the anxiety this film produces is so fantastic. I was like, I wish most horror movies could make me feel like this.
That's also the one with Rachel Sennett in it, right?
Yeah, Rachel Sennett. I was just about to say. I think that was like her breakout movie, and God, she's just like a star in that movie. You could tell, like, when you're watching, it's like, oh yeah, she's gonna be huge. You know,
you just can't take it. Like, just looking at pictures of her, I'm like, I can't take my fucking eyes off her. Like,
she's fantastic. I also watched Take Care of Maya. It was trending on Twitter. It's another Netflix documentary. It's not a true crime documentary, but it is about the Child Protective Services in Florida that took a child away from a family because she had like a very unique and rare disease. And basically, Child Protective Services in a hospital thought that the mother was like making her sick and everything. And it's just basically a documentary where everything about the situation was wrong. In the States, Child Protective Services are for profit. So it's like just very sketchy where people are making, deciding to rip kids away from their families after meeting them for 3 minutes. And like, that's all the time they're giving them. It was like really sad, really heartbreaking, but it was pretty interesting. I got to finish Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I know Colton made fun of me because I watched it after Barbie.
He did the double feature everyone's talking about.
Yeah. So this one's kind of funny because I actually started watching it when I was in Newfoundland and I had 20 minutes left of it. And so finally, Auxilia had a nap after we got back from Barbie, and I was like, you know what? I'll just finish the 20 minutes so I can log it. And it sucked as normal. And then the only two I wanted to really talk about left was I watched EO finally. I messaged the group chat, said I was tearing up. It was pretty good. It wasn't as, I think, devastating as, what was it called? Cow or whatever that I watched.
Yep.
Obviously this is like not a true story. This is a fake, it's a fiction, but it's all done from the perspective of a donkey traveling, Poland, I believe, and just encountering humans. And like any of these movies, it's just, it's posing the question, who's more animals or humans? It's always humans. There's some rough animal cruelty stuff in this that I saw some people on Letterboxd questioning it, as I did too, about, even if you're not hurting the animals, which they say at the end, no animals are hurt, you definitely have to do things to get real animals to, like, act afraid and, like, just be terrified. And how ethical that is, I'm not sure, but the donkey, there's 6 donkeys that play the one donkey. The donkey's fantastic. It was adorable. It's very trippy. It's very like an art house movie, perhaps using more, I thought I was watching a Michael Bay movie or something, because they're drone shots like crazy. It's like, you want to see a lot of drone shots with flashing neon strobe lights where half the movie I had no idea what I was looking at. It looked like I was looking through the islands of the Terminator. And it was just... Did
the donkey wander into a rave, or...?
The donkey does wander into raves and parties and
all right.
But this was just like outdoors. It was just experimental film. So, it was all right. I thought it was pretty good. And then the last thing I'll talk about, which I said I had to talk about, is I sat down with Auxilia and I watched They Clone Tyrone on Netflix. And, I messaged the group and I thought, oh, what's going to happen? A couple days are going to go by and then I'm going to be like, maybe it wasn't that good. It's still that good. So this is a new Netflix film, although I looked into it and it did play in some theaters in the States, specifically in Atlanta. It's the debut, a directorial debut from Jewel Taylor, who also co-wrote it. He's only written stuff, and ironically, it seems like he works maybe for LeBron James, because he wrote the new Space Jam movie that LeBron James produced, as well as Shooting Stars, which is the LeBron James autobiographical film he put out recently. This is not that. This is a hard Black Mirror science fiction horror noir, and it was mind-blowing. The music is fantastic. He's got people like Erykah Badu on it, and
Nice.
But it's also done in a lot of this kind of like Kendrick Lamar funk. I said Kendrick Lamar funk mixed with Beyond the Black Rainbow synth music. And it's just this, I've never seen science fiction done in black cinema like this before. And, to me, maybe people will think it's hyperbole, but I said in my Letterboxd review, it felt like when I was watching Jordan Peele for the first time in horror, I was like, I've never seen anything like this in science fiction. I was like, this is probably one of the most original voices I've ever seen in science fiction. It is a bit of a watch. It's 2.5 hours long, but I think it does pay off. Like most directorial debuts, there's a couple spots where I'm like, they might have been able to tighten this up, but there's just so many interesting ideas in it, and really it's just the visual and the feel of it. I was like, I can't believe this didn't go to theater. Jamie Foxx is in this, and he is fantastic. He plays this slick talking street pimp, which it was a character to me that would normally be played by Mike Epps, and Jamie Foxx doing it was perfect. I couldn't believe he was that good in it. And then John Boyega is the star of it, and he was fantastic. I've only really think I've seen Star Wars that he was in. And I only saw the first one that he was in. But he was awesome in this, especially where, as you can guess by the name, it's about clones. So he plays multiple people in this, and it's amazing. So I don't want to spoil it. Just watch it. It made me excited. It might have made me talk to me excited. That's how excited I was about watching him.
Yeah, and before we jump away, I actually watched that this afternoon as well, and I thought I didn't want to mention it in my part because I was like, Rowan 5-starred it. He feels very passionately about it. But I want to say similarly, I thought it was pretty great as well. I thought the writing was very strong. I thoroughly enjoyed the writing. Jamie Foxx is excellent, as is, I forget the name who's playing kind of the prostitute in the movie, but she was excellent as well.
Teyonah Parris.
Okay. Anyway, she was excellent as well. For me, I thought, there was a couple of kind of like what you were saying, directorial debut. It felt a little bit long. It did lose me at a certain point a little bit, but overall, thought it was great. Great voice, great style. It very much did not feel like a Netflix movie, and it felt like this was a directorial debut that was, it has a fully formed voice and style that I definitely want to see in more movies as well. I thought it was great.
I couldn't believe, I was like, what? You wrote Space Jam? I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I love projects like that because you can tell you were definitely collecting the clout and the money so you could make what you want to make.
100%. Yeah.
But with that and all my talking, let's get into the episode of the movie we're talking about. So Colton, why don't you let us know what we're watching and why you chose this film?
Yeah, so what we're going to be reviewing tonight is Alejandro Amenabar's 1996 film Thesis. And honestly, I don't really remember why I picked this movie. I know originally it was supposed to be a double feature of a beloved horror film and then its disastrous remake was what we were going to do, but I was so busy at the time that I was kind of like, I don't really want to watch two movies to review on the show. So I wound up just pulling this out of kind of like the ether, I think. I want to say maybe it was because I watched the Poughkeepsie tapes recently, and I kind of had like that fascination with snuff films in that movie, and kind of seeing like, oh, well, what are some other well-revered popular snuff horror films? And this was one that I knew about. It was on numerous lists, on like the 1,000 horror movies you need to watch before you die type of thing. And it's, it's been on my watch list for a while. So yeah, I think it was just kind of like it was time. I was like, let's check this out. It's also just a foreign language film, which I have realized we just did Train to Busan a couple weeks ago, but we don't always do numerous foreign language films.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, let's give this a shot. And so here it is.
Has enamorado del malo, imbécil.
Creo que alguien ha estado registrando mi dormitorio.
¿Pero qué coño haces ahí? Ese tío está implicado.
¡No te muevas!
Esto no es algo aislado, es un negocio. Esa gente trafica con cintas. Accidentes, torturas, asesinatos, allá abajo tienen de todo. Te matarán para hacer una película.
Me llamo Ángela. Me van a matar.
Thesis was written and directed by Alejandro Amenabar, and the story is as follows. While researching her thesis on the effects of audiovisual violence, Angela discovers a snuff film of a young woman being tortured to death. But when said victim is revealed to be a former student in her faculty just 2 years prior, Angela becomes obsessed with finding and bringing the killer to justice, all the while trying to avoid becoming the subject of the killer's next snuff film.
So let's start off with our first experiences. Is this our first time seeing it? Or are we just, our favorite kind of horror movie is Spanish horror? For some reason, none of us know that one of us can fluently speak Spanish. Mike, let's start with you.
I literally have never seen this before. I thought I had heard of it before, and maybe I did, but I also think I was confusing it with another vaguely similarly titled movie that might be an Italian one. But yeah, when I looked at the description of it right before watching it, I was like, yeah, I don't think I've ever even heard of this before. So yeah, I recognized the director, like when I looked at his filmography, I was like, oh yeah, I've seen a couple of these, and just for whatever reason, I guess this one literally just never came on my radar. So yeah, I'm always glad when someone brings something to the table that I haven't had on my list or even thought about. So yeah, nothing. What about you, Ro?
Well, I'm a little disappointed that you didn't answer me by immediately going into Spanish and then revealing yourself as that
I
person.
did.
Yeah.
You just didn't even hear it.
I guess I'm fluent in Spanish. It just sounds like English to me. Yeah. So kind of like you, I had never heard of it till Colton was like, hey, this film. And then similar to you, I looked it up. Now, I've never seen anything by this director. I'm obviously very aware of the others that he directed. And especially, it was kind of fitting because I think last week Criterion announced The Others on 4K. So that his name has kind of been popping up all over my social feeds. But yeah, I had no idea what this was. Horror in academia kind of interests me. It's intersection. So I was very interested to see this. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, I kind of spoiled it a little bit in just the why I picked this. So we got to get better at not spoiling that in the future. But yeah, this was my first time seeing it. I have seen The Others by Amenabar before this, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. I thought it was okay, but it was kind of like a sleepy ghost story. I've also heard of I think Regression he did with Emma Watson. I heard of that, but I think it got pretty mixed reviews, so I never actually watched it. But yeah, this was my first time viewing it as well. I was familiar with it, unlike both of you, but yeah, it's just like something that was on my watch list when it was probably 400 or 500 movies deep, and then when I culled it all the way back to like 20 or 30 movies, so it was somewhat manageable, I left this one on there just because I've seen positive reviews of it. Then I was like, hey, I want to check this out. And also, as we've kind of mentioned numerous times on the show, analog horror and like found footage and those sorts of topics, I usually very much enjoy horror movies kind of, built in those sorts of topics. So yeah, that was my first time checking it out.
Well, with that, let's get into the VHS and specifically porn tapes of it all, because I know that's the only tapes we all love. Let's start with our favorite scene and or favorite kill. Colton, we'll let you go first. This was your pick.
Yeah, I like that I managed to pick something that none of us have seen, just because it's going to make for possibly a more interesting discussion here. But my favorite scene scene in the movie, I think it's just kind of like a chase sequence in the movie, and it's between Angela and Bosco. It's basically after you find out that you're looking for the XT500 Sony like camera, and she winds up scouting or seeing him recording a woman in the school, and just the way this sequence plays out, where you can just tell that Angela is kind of putting all the pieces together, that she might be watching the killer record his next victim, and about how she kind of stalks after him, and the score kicks in such a big way that it's so like propulsive and so exciting that I was like, okay, all right, here we go. This is what I've been waiting for in this movie, essentially. And then how when the chase goes on and he winds up seeing her, and the whole power dynamic shifts and the score along with it, and it shifts from kind of like this game of cat and mouse to very much like her being stalked by a potential killer, and it kind of ratchets up the tension to like such a a masterful degree that I really like that sequence, which is just literally is just a game of cat and mouse. And obviously she's not like murdered at the end of it or anything, but it was a strong scene that I was like, okay, this is like kind of the potential that you can kind of have when you're flirting with something that's more so like a psychological horror or more of like a a thriller. So yeah, that was probably my favorite scene. No killing, but my favorite scene in the movie. What about you, Rowan?
Yeah, mine's actually pretty close to the beginning, and it's not a kill. I feel like the last couple movies, my favorite scenes haven't been kills. I'm getting soft.
I know,
I'm getting soft in my old age or something here, guys. But it's actually, I mean, it will make sense. It is when we go to Shima's apartment, or that's in, I don't know, a house or something. Obviously, I just was living for whatever the aesthetic he's going for. There's like dolls hanging on, like life-size mannequins hanging on the ceiling with like needles in them and stuff. Basically anything that Shima can put in his house that make him seem real edgy, real cool. But I loved it, obviously, because there were so many great like Easter eggs from like posters and stuff up on the wall.
Yeah.
My goal in life is to find that Aliens poster on the back of his door. I was like, that poster is so fantastic. Like, I will pay anything for that poster.
100% it exists out there somewhere.
And then I know it has to.
Get on eBay, man. Seriously.
And then I know what would have, that caught my eye, that would have caught Mike's eye immediately, is he had that fantastic Spanish Nightbreed poster.
Yes, of course.
And I was like, yes, please, yes. I've said it many times, Nightbreed might be like one of my favorite Clive Barker films.
Daddy Clive.
That's right. But yeah, it was basically just his whole aesthetic. Obviously, as a VHS collector, I don't collect porn tapes, but I respect his organization.
Sure, Dan.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I loved everything. His room might be a little too messy for me. I feel like there's bugs definitely just walking around on that floor. Yeah, that whole scene, I really liked kind of coming in Shima's world. Or is it Shima? Kima? I don't know how he's...
I know who you're talking about. Kima, maybe.
Kima, yeah. Anyway, Mike, how about you?
Hilariously, those were my two like kind of primary favorite parts as well. So I'm actually kind of glad that they both stuck out to you as well. Like Colton, like my whole idea about that scene is like you said, it is very like exceptionally well done, but also it just keeps making me think of something that like a lot of horror movies in the last like probably 10 years or so have been lacking, that was like for the 80s and 90s like standard, is a good chase scene. Like there's no good chase scenes anymore. Like that's like literally my favorite part of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that 10-minute long chase scene. And I know it's like the fucking apex of everything, so everything will pale in comparison, but like to me that's like I was thinking of I Know What You Did Last Summer, like there's a good chase scene in that, it was like Scream 2, there's a good chase, like literally every movie that to me is like a banger and is like even vaguely slashery or like, has anything to do with like violence or like a kind of an extreme thriller always has a solid chase scene. So I'm glad you picked that. And bro, that whole scene, I was like, I could feel myself in that apartment.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I could smell it. I could feel the dampness. I could feel the dirt. Like, literally, I was like, I've been in that apartment so many times in my life. It was so true to life.
I was just gonna say, like, later on in the movie, when we explore more of his apartment, like, we get more, like, he has the Alien 3 poster.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like David Fincher represent.
He has the Shocker poster. And then, you know,
Wes Craven,
Angela's got the Gus Van Sant My Private Idaho poster.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I love a movie with some good kind of callbacks to films.
Yeah, I mean, his T-shirts throw it as well. Like, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say
there's a Cannibal Holocaust one at one point. I think,
Yeah.
right? That was like an Italian or Spanish version one. Yeah, it's just I was like, oh.
But I mean, and it's just so funny because, like, clearly there are parallels, and like these are not just all like, oh, let's just put some horror stuff in there. Like, literally everything is, like you said, an Easter egg of some sort. Because, you know, clearly this is a meticulously put together film. Like, Cannibal Holocaust in particular, I was like, well done. The snuff film referencing a famous, is it or is it not a snuff film, right? Like,
yeah, it's
perhaps the most famous, yeah.
Yeah, it's the type of movie that a guy like this would be obsessed with, or at least, you know, want to like reference and let people know that he's seen it and he's bold enough to wear it on his shirt, you know? Like, it felt very much it fit the world of what he would be repping.
Yeah, well, and from what I read, like, I think he started making this while in film school. So it kind of makes sense with all, like, you know, the posters and the shirts and, like, kind of referencing, you know, I thought it was interesting. I read that, like, the school this is set in, like, is the school he went to. Like, so it's kind of based in his reality. I mean, hopefully not fully his reality. But, well, we'll find out, you know, if it's ever uncovered. This guy also made a lot of snuff films. As long as they got sweet posters in them, guys.
That's literally the easiest way to throw, like, a film student off. Film buffs, just be like, oh, look, here we go. Here's some shit in the background to distract you. Mm-hmm. And you can ponder over endlessly. But I mean, other than those two parts, I guess my other favorite part was, like, I literally called it the banging news segment at the end. Because that intro with, like, the synth music and the insane, like, just montage of, like, grainy VHS like film camera footage. That intro was like everything to me. It totally, like, I was falling asleep, not in a bad way, but just because I'm exhausted while I was watching this, and that at that point like really woke me up. And I just really enjoyed that news segment because it sort of like brought to a boil all the ideas that have been sort of simmering throughout the whole movie, and I appreciated that there was finally some kind of payoff, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a really good like ending, and you know, that news sequence, just because the whole kind of thesis of this movie is essentially that like this media only exists in order to serve an audience, right? And throughout the movie, you're not really seeing who are the people that are, you know, devouring these snuff films. Like, obviously we get the professor who's an editor, and obviously we know like Angela and Kima are like somewhat interested in this, like, you know, either for being a freak or for, you know, for studying, you know, as part of her thesis. But then it shows that, hey, all these people in the hospital that have all likely experienced some sort of bodily harm or trauma themselves are still willing to watch other people suffer it, and they're still like glued to the television screen. They can't wait to watch it, right? So it's basically posing that this sort of media is always going to have an audience, which of course is what the modern news cycle has wound up capitalizing on for however many years now, right? So yeah, I really like that sequence as well, right at the end of the movie. And I agree with you, is like you were waiting for the payoff, or for like the thematic payoff for this movie. You finally get it within like the last minute.
I know, I was like, okay, you can't call this movie Thesis and then
and say nothing.
Yeah, exactly, right? So 100%. I was like, oh, thank God, okay. Thank fucking God, finally. And like I said, the banger intro, I was just like, literally, I got up and was like, okay, can I find this soundtrack somewhere? Spotify.
I just hope that she wasn't paying a bunch of money to do her master's at this school, because I thought it was pretty funny, like any of the kind of classes they showed her showing up to and stuff were like, they're basically like, I don't even talking about like film 1000 things. Like the guy goes in the speech where he's like, film is an industry. And I'm like, oh shit, this is hard-hitting master's work stuff.
Yeah, it's complex stuff.
It needs to make money. I was gonna say with the themes, like, I was kind of interested because for part of it, I was kind of curious and almost offended, where I was like, does this guy even really like horror that's like writing and directing this? Because I was like, it's also basically like, yeah, also people like consume this violence, but anyone that we're kind of introduced to other than, you know, sitting up at the hospital, but characters, real characters we develop, like if they have any interest in kind of like the horror genre, they're just like psychos and, you know, just unsavory characters. So then I kind of got to thinking, because, you know, I was looking at this guy's other filmography other than, like you said, Colton, Regression and the others and stuff. I'm like, this guy really doesn't, other than those, doesn't do a lot of horror stuff.
No.
So then I'm like, oh, should I also be hating this guy? Because this is like one of these guys that just hates horror.
Ari Aster original. No offense.
It was funny when you were, this has nothing to do with what Rowan just said, but like when you were talking about how modern movies are lacking chase sequences, and I was like, yeah, that's because it's hard for grief to chase someone like in a visceral
I know,
way on
exactly.
Screen, you know?
So, like,
it's all
let's
metaphorical
get some bangers.
nowadays. Absolutely nothing to do with Rowan's salient point, but you know, it's just.
But it's true. But
sequences.
but like those two ideas are obviously very related.
Yeah, but
so thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, obviously, Rowan, like the core of this movie, like obviously, Amanda Bauer, he's definitely interested in the whole discussion of, does violent media make people violent? Which I hate this discussion because it's something that I've been living through the years of video games. Then obviously someone like yourself who's just like a lifelong horror fan, like, you know, the video nasties era, it's obviously something we're all know about. So I don't really like that framing either, but I do like the fascination of kind of Angela kind of dipping her toe into kind of like that dark world of like snuff films and becoming like fascinated by it in a way that she frames as like a virtuous way of like discovering the killer. But it also is something that, just from people I know like in my life who's kind of wound up, you know, spending too much time on Live Leak or watching too many, you know, messed up videos, that it kind of does like suck you in a weird like dark way, that like some of these people, like it winds up being like a badge of honor that they've watched some of these weird ass films as well. It sucks you in because obviously once you've kind of experienced that sort of media, a lot of, you know, more vanilla media or like what you'd find in theaters is probably not going to satisfy that same, you know, what you got from the other sorts of media. So yeah, it's just like I liked kind of how much it kind of just devoured her throughout the course of the movie, I guess, and Kima as well, right? Just like constantly scrubbing through all this footage and being endlessly entertained and fascinated by it, right?
I loved the like juxtaposition between the two of them though, because it is essentially the two kind of like poles of that like spectrum. One is the like stereotypical like kind of gore hound, like makes no bones, wears the fucking Cannibal Holocaust t-shirt, is like, and like wears that as like this is my personality, you know, it's like their armor. And then on the other end of the spectrum you have the person who is equally fascinated by it and pulled to it, but is like, oh, I have to couch this as a academic interest because that puts a distance between me and that. And I'm not interested in it because I'm pulled to it like in a car crash sense, even though they are. But, you know, it's like, no, it's an academic interest. I'm like, no, I don't want to look at that, but I want to write a thesis on it. Which means you have to completely immerse yourself in it. And also the fact that I, like, have literally known professors and students who are like, when I got into this research of, like, you know, topics in, like, deviancy or whatever, like, I literally became, like, part of that subculture that I was studying or whatever. Like, it's, you know, whatever it might be. And it's just, like, it erases that, like, notion of, like, detachment and objectivity, and it's like, I'm not fascinated by this because it's morbid. I'm fascinated because, you know, I want to study human behavior or whatever. And it's like,
and
there is validity to that, but also like, who are you trying to kid here, I guess, you know.
Yeah, there's that one scene with the professor who winds up being the editor as well. I forget his name, Castro, I think.
Yeah,
Professor Castro, where he kind of like calls her out on that to a certain degree, where it's like, but your thesis doesn't really have a point, right? You're just kind of consuming this stuff and looking at it, and you haven't found a lens to view it through yet. So it is kind of like calling out that, like, to a certain degree right now, you're not viewing it through a lens of academia, you're viewing it through a lens of fascination, but also the part that she never revealed, she's viewing it through a lens of like trying to find the killer, which I think is something we definitely have to discuss on just how clever this movie is in using like analog aspects to kind of peel back the mystery. Like I remember the first part where he's like staring at like the digital zoom lines on the screen, and I'm like, what is this guy getting on with? This is just nonsense. And then they reveal like, oh well, digital zoom didn't exist until 2 years ago, which means there's a limited amount of cameras that could do this. And I was just like, oh shit, this is exceedingly clever on how to like kind of boil down like, well, who would even have this camera at this point in time to record a video like this? And the movie kind of kept coming up with different analog ways that, you know, a lot of defunct technology that we don't use anymore, that I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like even something so simple like in the beginning, like where she was swapping the RGB cables because she didn't want to see the images on the screen, or she just wanted to hear the audio and stuff. I was like, this is cool. Like this is shit that doesn't exist at all anymore. Like no one really bothers with it, that this movie was completely concerned with. And I
and like her Walkman, like
I was eating it all up. It was great. Like I loved all the analog, you know,
I literally had like this giant like exclamation point that like all the analog tech was really comforting for me, even when they were watching like horrific images on it, or just listening to those like absolutely torturous screams. But I was like that was like probably one of my favorite aspects of the movie. Like you said, was at the time it would have been like, oh, this is sort of like using technology, like this is clever, right? You know what I mean? Like this is next level shit. And now it's like, oh my god, like all this technology is so dated, but that is honestly what makes it so appealing.
And how
like, there's just something so comforting.
Yeah, and how quaint that the movie takes place in a time where all the people that bought the Sony XT500 could be on a floppy disk.
On a floppy disk, I know. Blink and you miss it, floppy disk. Like, if someone 20 years old watched this now, they'd be like, what the fuck did she just pull out of that computer?
So like, lost. Yeah. We're like the perfect age demographic where we can remember all this technology, but also have a little bit of nostalgia and love for it.
Yeah.
That, when I was watching it, I was just like endlessly fascinated by how they use a lot of that analog technology. Did it do much for you, Rowan?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm always a sucker for these movies that have that VHS quality and feel. You could definitely, like I said, I think it was interesting because where this was so early in his career, you know, you could kind of tell that like film school love where he was very precise, like even with Kima having the like all the manuals in his like so he had all his manuals, the different cameras,
because he's a film bro.
Yeah, but it was like you could tell like, okay, like I understand that the guy made this film like actually does know all this stuff about like cameras and film and editing and all this kind of stuff. So that adds like just this like layer of authenticity to it, because this could be done so wrong so quickly by someone that like doesn't really care or understand about the technology.
Yeah, they're just dipping their toes in it and like, I'm just gonna research this quickly.
Yeah, it's just some camera. It's like there's one camera and that's the camera. And I mean, to me, I don't know why anyone would trust Kima at all in the film. Because if you just hoard random manuals like that, like just for things you don't even own, like there's something already going on there. So I think that makes you an unstable person.
Yeah, imagine having that many manuals and actually reading them. That's you're clearly off the deep end.
One thing that I like, that what we were just talking about that occurred to me, I was thinking like, why other than nostalgia are we so kind of like enamored with all that technology? And it kind of dawned on me that like it's all very tactile. Like now it would just be like a touch screen, or like you'd just be using your mouse and like literally do everything on a computer screen. But like it's all like you're pushing big chunky buttons and physically rewinding something and like holding onto the camera and like plugging it in. And it's all very like, it's such a tactile experience, and it makes me think of like ASMR on like big chunky keyboards and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And like that's what, to me, I guess why it's so comforting is because like it's a movie based around technology that isn't all just like digital pixels and shit. It's like a literal, like you can touch it and feel it, and I wanted to grab everything and like hold it.
Yeah, the tactile was literally the word that I was looking for as well. That it's just, it was very satisfying to watch them literally have to turn the knobs or like go back and forth and
pull the
scrub
plugs
for like,
out.
the cuts. Yeah, it was all really good. And specifically, the movie is kind of clever in a way that I almost wish it went one step further in this regard. It kind of, shines a spotlight on the importance of cuts in film language anyways, because they have that sequence where it's like, it's not about what we're watching. It's not about the torture. It's about what they chose intentionally to cut out to veil. So it's like, what are we missing here? Like, what would they be cutting out? And I absolutely loved kind of shining a spotlight on that. But I also wish that the movie itself had like something cut out that, we needed to kind of piece together at a certain point or something like that. That was a little bit of an extra meta layer to really elevate it a little bit more, because that was I was like, this is great. I was like, this is great. And I love that they're focusing on this, but I was hoping there was going to be a payoff or something to it.
It's so funny because I was thinking the same thing. That whole sequence, like, I thought was it was very thrilling when they were watching the movie. And by the way, what they showed, I thought was extremely effective because I didn't think they were going to show anything at all. And they didn't show too much. It was like literally just enough to like horrify me. But there was a point later on in the movie when he starts like filming her for her part of the interview. Yeah. And there is a bunch of cuts. And I kind of thought that was going to be like a payoff. Because I thought
the footage was going to come back. Yeah.
And it didn't, which was a little bit disappointing. But, whatever. But I just, I kind of want to just like call out that was a really interesting thing that I kind of hooked onto too, and was also a bit disappointed that they didn't push further.
What do we think about that scene? It was where basically every word she said, he'd advance an inch closer to her, and it was kind of like this really uncomfortable, kind of rapey scene. What did we think about that?
I mean, it was definitely uncomfortable.
That was the intention of the scene for sure, but
unpleasant. I mean, I guess I didn't mind it because, at that point, I mean, we're all kind of, one thing that I kind of wish this film did in general was it didn't really leave you with any real mystery. It was like you pretty much knew the players who was guilty the minute they came on screen. Like, you were like, okay. But I did like that it set up kind of, this cat and mouse game with Bosco and Angela. So even though, like, he's kind of, trying to pick her up, obviously, and finds her attractive, like, it still has that creepy, because by that point, I'm like, I mean, we all know this guy did it, so it just gives more of that kind of, like, serial killer taunting his prey type thing.
That's interesting. At that point in the movie, you 100% believed it was him?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, okay, well, the movie was a little, I guess maybe I'm just a little bit more dense, but, like, right off the bat, I was kind of like, okay, it's obviously the other professor in this VHS
that was the
room.
biggest one.
I was like, okay, it's obvious this guy, it's the other professor. But then I was like, okay, never mind, he was just an editor. And I was like, okay, it's obviously Bosco. There's too many signs. But then the movie like sets up Kima for a while, and I'm like, okay, it is building case, maybe it is Kima. And then it's like very quickly they're like, yo, it's Yolanda, it's Bosco's girlfriend. And I was like, all right, maybe it could be. So I was actually along for the ride. Maybe I was missing very obvious signs, but I thought it was like twisty and turny enough that I was like, I have multiple notes where I was like, oh no, not Kima, or like, oh, it's Bosco again, question mark, shit like that. But I guess it was just obvious to you, but for me, I was like, oh, I thought the movie did a good job.
I thought Kima was also in on, like, I was like, okay.
You thought it was both of them? We were getting a Scream thing where it was both
I was like, everybody's in on it.
Yeah, there was a good chance of that as well, especially when the pictures revealed that they were friends but kind of drifted apart and stuff as well. I was like, oh, interesting.
I thought that was interesting because, I mean, obviously, as someone that is a big fan of like giallo films, like, there's no way this wasn't like very influenced by, like 70s, 80s giallo movies.
And like De Palma.
But it was just one of those things where, as twisty and turny as it was, like, I wish there was more of a mystery to the killers. Like, one thing I love about giallo movies is that, like, it's always like we see the hand with the leather glove, but it's like we never really ever see the person except maybe once at the beginning, and it's like, oh, it was that guy from the beginning. Where this is just like kind of taunting in your face. It's like, oh, here's these guys. I mean, at least one of these guys is gonna be it. So it was so
Mm.
to me, I was just like, oh, well, okay. Like, I don't really care which one of these guys it is or whatever.
Fair.
I was just like, I kind of wish it was more of a taunt, more, more of, maybe like, Bosco, but not knowing it's Bosco, like maybe filming her from like more outside, like things like that where it's like creepy and you're like, okay, well, someone obviously, especially where they do the thing where multiple people obviously have access to this camera.
Yeah.
Or even like, because at first I kind of thought, I was like, well, if they don't do the obvious, like it did say on the screen that the camera was they bought all these cameras for the film class. So, maybe it's going to be like some guy that we saw in the class that like literally other than that we never saw, and it's just like he's kind of framing these big personalities in the class. But yeah, I guess I just wish there's like a little more mystery for me to it. And
yeah,
I also recognize that like me guessing about Bosco, like that also could just be 100% lucky guess where I was just like, oh yeah, I think it's him. So
well, yeah, the movie very much like puts him front and center as the choice, and then they kind of misdirect you and convince you it's other people. But it is like you said, there's literally like 3 people that could be like a satisfactory answer to this,
the
right?
The suspect list was just way too short for it to be super effective.
I can see that's definitely could be an issue there.
I feel the same way as Ro.
I think we should talk about that one scene where all the lights go out, because this is one of the, like, when they're in kind of the snuff film tunnel. I think this is like one of the scenes in the movie that actually makes it feel a little bit more like a horror movie. There's actually a scene where I was like, okay, there's enough suspicions towards Kima that it could be him in the tunnel with her, and it's also just convenient as soon as they're like finding where the masters might be, where obviously if they had the master footage it could reveal the names and the pieces of information that they're missing. But I thought this was a pretty effective scene with like the matches consistently going out and eventually lighting her sweater on fire. Like I thought I really enjoyed it, discovering like the old like kind of grimy editing bay like deep in the school. Like it was all really cool. I thoroughly enjoyed that sequence.
I agree. I the whole time I was watching it though, and again maybe because I was really tired and I was trying to keep my eyes open, and I was like yelling at the screen. I'm like, okay, just turn around. There's cameras over there. They definitely have a light on them. Like, why are you just sitting there watching your fucking sweater burn off? I know it's supposed to be some kind of like existential thing, where you're gonna die, but like. But it was extremely effective. I thought it was very like gothic. It was like, ooh, we found the like secret dungeon lair in the like gothic castle, and you're like there with your little, fucking candelabra, and it like blows out, and it's like, ooh, the count is like in the castle. You know what I mean? Like it just seemed. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I could see that he maybe was like paying homage to that sort of thing too. It was very like Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, I liked it. I also thought it was kind of quaint that the director believes that this is the way that people would, pass around snuff films. They'd go to like a dedicated spot in like a campus behind like a false wall and down a sketchy hallway to get it. It's just like, nah, bro. There's people just passing that shit around at like video stores in the back room and, sliding at one another on the streets. They're not going to like a dedicated snuff hallway,
The like snuff dungeon of the campus library. Like,
It was kind of funny, I was like, I give it a pass. It was kind of, it was just a little cheesy.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It was, it's kind of like, oh, how cute,
Yeah.
Well, and I didn't even notice, like, so I thought that was a pretty good, like, twist, because, like, when we get to the basement and the kind of, like, the editing room or whatever, like, I just kind of automatically assumed, I'm like, oh, okay, this is where they shot the video. Like, this is where the videos are made. So then when we get that twist, like, at the end, like, oh, shit, no, it's this guy's garage.
Yeah. It's another white bricked.
Yeah, it's another white bricked area. Yeah. But also, this is where I also felt, I was like, man, maybe we could have, I don't know, just kind of, I felt like the film was a little too long. Like, I thought this probably ran about a half hour over my patience for it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, remember my message in the group chat? I was like, this is over 2 hours.
Yeah, which, to be fair, when I chose the movie, I did not notice at all. And if I knew it was over 2 hours long, I probably wouldn't have even chose it, because the reason I was choosing a movie was to get something that was short, and I didn't want to commit to watch it like 3 hours worth of shit, right? So yeah, so it was accidental that was the case. And when you sent that, I was like, oh no, it's over 2 hours long and a foreign
to be
film.
Fair, it was only because I had trouble finding it online and getting it to work on my TV, and at that point it was almost midnight, and I was like, I can't watch a 2-hour movie at midnight.
Well, like, to be fair, for me to get a copy of this, I had to go to the Munn Library, and I had to go to the back, and I had to push on a false wall and go down a long hallway and go to the bookshelf and find it. Essentially, you know, I agree, though. It was hard to find online. Yeah, like...
You guys did all that work. All I did was go on YouTube. And it was there.
You just was it actually there on YouTube? Just
there's like a very, very decent quality copy on YouTube with subtitles.
Oh, all right.
Are you kidding me? I literally Friday night, just like, this is for everyone to know, like, this is my struggle when I try to watch a movie that I don't like own on Blu-ray or something. Like, I downloaded it on my old laptop, which the speakers don't work anymore, and the headphone jack barely works, and it's so slow that, like, I can't cast it to my TV like I used to be able to, like, 5 years ago. So I literally spent an hour Friday night trying to watch this movie. And because the file size was so big, because it was like a 1080p, you know, file, it was like 5 gigs, and I couldn't transfer it to my new computer. It was just like a fucking nightmare. And I wish I had known that it was on fucking YouTube, because I could have just gone on Roku TV, put on the YouTube app, and watched it.
Yeah, well, I just thought, I was like, oh, maybe. So all I did was I was Googling. And then I Googled, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to, like, either buy it on iTunes, or I'll see if it's anywhere else, though. So I'm like, Thesis, 1996, online. First link that popped up for me, it's like YouTube. So I'm like, well, automatically when you see YouTube, you're like, this is probably going to be one of those links I click, and then it's going to play, like, 2 seconds of the movie, and then it'll be like, go to this website.
Yeah, and download it on this sketchy website, yeah.
But I brought it up on my TV, and I was very surprised. I was like, whoa, this is like actually like high def. Wow. Like, I was like, fantastic. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, also, if you're looking to watch this movie, like, it's pretty easy to get a hold of. But yeah,
apparently,
like I said, to me, it was just with that length, like, I just thought, like, it could have been cleaned up probably, like, a little more. Some of the stuff, like, I thought kind of dragged.
There was a lot of loose threads.
Yeah, there was like a lot of loose threads. I mean, really, we could have closed this movie after 15 minutes, because when that professor introduces himself, and he says he's an audio-visual psychology is what he does. Audio-visual psychology. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not a thing. I think this is made up.
I heard psychopath.
Wait, are you talking about Guillermo del Toro or the other professor? Which one are you talking about? Because that one guy, Figueroa, I was just like, bro, that's Guillermo del Toro, 100%. You know, built the same way, loves cinema the same way. He's like dawdling
Spanish,
around,
like
Spanish. That's Guillermo. Like, I can just tell.
Which he, if I hadn't loved The Apartment so much, would have been probably my pick for favorite scene. I really did like the scene where she finds him in the theater dead. It really gave me like Hitchcock feel, like just like kind of the reveal that like they had great makeup on his face, like just kind of white, and like her like touching him, which also kind of what Mike was talking about, like added like this like tactileness to it. Like I thought that was really well done.
It's also a way to like show the audience that obviously her fascination isn't purely academic either.
Exactly.
There is just an inherent draw to this sort of media, or to this dark aspect, where she mentioned a couple scenes before that she's never seen a body in real life, but she kind of wants to. And even the opening scene, right, with the train scene that they cut away right before she gets a view of the man on the tracks, right? There's like this moth to a flame sort of
like she's disappointed that the guy ushers her away.
Yeah, exactly. She wanted to see it, right? She won't admit it, and she puts it in this guise of academia, but she wants to see it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
and I actually liked when they kind of throw that back on her as well, where there actually is like the CRT video footage of her discovering the body. Now, why wasn't that a bigger issue with like police investigations and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll forget about that.
Like,
but
did they not walk in the room and see the cameras everywhere?
Exactly.
And go, hey,
that'd be
there must be footage.
The first thing you do is request that footage from university, 100%, right? But yeah, whatever.
She just goes down that path, guys, like so quickly. I mean, it's only halfway through the film. Like, first is just trying to take a peek at cut up bodies on the train tracks. Next thing you know, she's having these like knife play sex dreams of Bosco.
Yeah.
That scene, I when it started, I was like, oh, I hate this in a way. Like in terms of just like waking up and seeing like the blinking red light in the corner of your room that someone's there watching and recording you. I was like, fuck that. I do not like that idea. But yeah, when it devolved into like this knife play horny dream sequence, I was like, oh, okay, well, this isn't, you know, frightening anymore. But you know, I thought it was very interesting. Like I think we discussed it before on the show, but like kind of like the line between horror / gore and porn, and about how both industries were kind of portrayed in a similar light back then. I think maybe with the discussions of X, or you know, kind of some movies in the last couple of years that's been more brought to the forefront. But I just thought it was a good way to kind of represent that on screen, you know, violence and sex and kind of it mixing together, you know, in this sex scene.
Yeah. There was not enough sexiness in this movie, but anyway.
There could have been a little bit more sexiness, I will agree. There's that disco club scene where she goes in. Yeah, it's making out with him in the club.
That song was
like, there was a couple, I know, I 100% agree. There was a couple moments when I thought, like, because I kept, not in a bad way, but I think one of the reasons why I enjoyed this movie was I kept going, oh, I'm getting echoes of this movie or that movie, like Blowout or Videodrome or whatever, or The Ring. And I kept thinking, like, oh, I have a vague whiff, like, just, you know, like something in the air of like Basic Instinct. And I was thinking, you know, because it was the paranoia, like, is this person a killer or are they not? And I'm kind of attracted to them. And that, you know, would have been like, what, like I think 2 or 3 years before this came out. So that would have been a huge, like, touchstone for thrillers. And I kind of thought, like, and in that scene in particular, I thought, oh, it's gonna go down that route and it's gonna get like a little bit sexy and it's gonna, like, you know, mix some sexiness in with all this violence and stuff, and it just sort of like fizzled out, and that's fine. They can't all be like smoldering.
Yeah, it skirts past it a little bit, but I agree. I was like yourself, Mike, where I was waiting for it to go down that road, and I was fine for it to go down that road, especially with you know, setting the movie in like university, you know, years, you know,
everyone's horny, like
exactly.
They're all banging. Please.
Well, especially like I said, where like I felt like the film just really kind of wore its like giallo influences, and I mean, giallos are just like notorious for kind of mixing like sex and violence, and you know, oftentimes, especially with, you know, some of like the older 70s stuff, like really like kind of like kinky, like just that kind of lifestyle into it. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I was like, maybe we could have delved a little more into that and a little more into her like psyche, or how these are mixing in her brain.
Yeah, I actually kind of wanted a little bit more of a mental unraveling by this character, and I think the movie Censor is probably a good like sister film to this, where she does wind up mentally unraveling and seeing herself in the movies that she's censoring and that sort of thing. But honestly, I kind of misunderstood the premise of this movie when I originally did a quick read on it. I thought she found a snuff film with her in it. And I thought it was like that was gonna be like the core of the movie of like what is going on. And I kind of want to see that movie, to tell you the truth. Like this was like, still a good movie, but I thought that was the premise of this movie. And I was like, oh shit! Like, when is she gonna find the snuff film that has her in it? And how is that gonna like affect her? And like, you know, she's gonna lose this grasp on reality. And that didn't happen. So I you know, misread
idea
something
for a
at some
sequel.
point. Yeah, there we go. But yeah,
doctoral dissertation 2024. It's coming. Not
it's coming. Yeah, keep an eye out. Yeah, but no, I really like that. One thing I'll say is I'll agree with Rowan that I do think the movie was a little bit, you know, little long. I do think it was all like everything that was on screen I enjoyed, or I thought it was well paced, or I didn't think it was as boring as I thought it was going to be. And the score, like I said, I thought the score was awesome. But I think the movie does kind of do double duty, because basically they make a snuff film pretty much, right, by killing Castro, like in front, like accidentally, I guess, you know, Kima comes in and defends her and, you know, accidentally shoots him. But they do create a snuff film by that, and Bosco mentions that they did a really bad job hiding the body and stuff, or disposing of the body, where I was like, oh, that's interesting, that all happened off screen, or like it wasn't a big point, you know. So like they undersell that one so you can have the stronger snuff film of killing Bosco at the end, and it's just, it feels like a repeated beat where it's like, okay, I guess technically Kima did the first one and she did the second one, but I think it would have just been better to get rid of the Castro one, that it's not actually captured on film, if they got to kill him off.
And use the one for a payoff.
Yeah, use the one big one that it's captured, and it's Angela that does it herself. And I actually love that the movie subverts the expectations of, like, he doesn't actually get the gun from her either, because there's so many movies where he would get the gun, and then he'd have this big, long villain speech, and then, Kima would come in and maybe knock it out of his hands, and then she'd kill him. But it's just instantly, it's just really quick, right? She just he puts an end to it. I really like that. And obviously just the obvious aspect of creating their own snuff film, killing him. It's just, it feels like a repeated beat, I guess. It's just
by the time the climactic one happens, it's like we've already gone down this
road.
We've
seen it. We've seen it framed through the camera. Like we know it was recorded.
We get the it's a sledgehammer now. Like we understand.
So that was a little sloppy, I guess. I did like the scene and the ending, but I just wish I didn't see kind of a preview of it 20 minutes before that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bosco's
it just waters it down like just
name.
A little bit. Yeah.
Bosco's a tough name.
Bosco, like I've never heard that name.
Oh my god, one of my favorite Drag Race queens is named Bosco. I loved it. I was like, this is the inferior Bosco.
Maybe they're a big fan of this movie,
Oh, maybe. I'm gonna tweet at her.
Yeah, there you go.
I want to know if when you guys go to bed tonight, are you guys gonna go to bed and just pull out your Walkman and listen to the sounds of snuff films and women screaming?
Like you say that as if we don't do that every night.
Well, I mean, my go-to pickup line is, "I heard you have videos on gore and porn." It's just what she says to Kima, like right away. I was like, man, now this is forward. There's like, no room for interpretation here. What she wants from you.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too. Like when we get introduced to like Chemo and Angela and all that stuff. Like,
I love how you're calling him Chemo now. This is
Chemo,
like just evolved into
Kima, I think, right? Kima or Chima?
Chima. I think it's Chima. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Simo.
Chemo.
But like, where he's listening to like heavy metal in his Walkman, because obviously, why wouldn't he?
That scene was brilliant, and she's listening to like classical music.
Yes.
But every inclination of me, I was like, have we not learned anything from any movie? It's always the person listening to classical music that's the killer.
It's the
100%. Yeah,
like 100%. But yeah, I just thought it was funny. Like, let's just throw more stereotypes on the pile here.
Like, that's the thing though. Like, for the audience that'd be watching this movie, they would be judging and thinking like, oh yeah, obviously the guy with the fascination for creepy tapes and listens to heavy metal music and lives in kind of a dirty, dingy dive would be the killer, right? So it's just kind of playing into that audience expectation. But I did like the different POV shots with the different music types as well. It's like, it's another early scene in the movie where I'm like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. This is an interesting choice, right? That you don't really see in too many other movies doing that sort of thing.
I want to say one small, quick, very insignificant thing before we move on.
Insert
and it is
15-minute story.
Nope. I just want to say, can we please have a moment of appreciation for the absolute slay that is the lady that works at Sony's rat tail?
Oh my god.
I had made a full ass note on about how much I was obsessed with it. It's so Rachel Summers from X-Men in the 80s, like
that
the little
that rat tail might have been the most shocking thing of the whole movie, was that reveal.
Yeah, when she turned her head, that was a fucking jump scare right there. It wasn't the snuff film. It was her rat tail.
Guys, in a different universe, I still have my rat tail. I had a rat tail until grade 3 or 4. Yeah.
Nothing makes me happier than knowing that.
Yeah. I'm just I'm gonna picture that in my head from now on.
But yeah, no, I got nothing else to discuss. I think we kind of wound up talking about.
I think we've done well. Yeah.
All right, well, let's land the plane on this one and get into rating it. If you are new to the show, our rating system is nay, okay, yay, or slay. Colton, this was your pick. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so like I said, my perception or expectations of this movie were slightly off just because I misunderstood what it was going to be about. But I still like the genre of like what this film is, like analog horror, blurring the lines between violent cinema and snuff films. I like that idea of just being so fascinated with the subject and just kind of getting like pulled in like this vacuous hole that just kind of pulls you in. You get completely consumed by it. I think the score slaps. I think it's like an excellent score. I love how much it just soars and allows it to be like the star of certain scenes. And I think a lot of the detective horror that's framed through the use of the analog media is really well done. That being said, I do think it repeats a couple of beats. It's slightly too long. So, I'd give this one a yay. Just, not a strong yay, not a weak yay. It's a yay. I enjoyed my time with it. It's probably not something I'd go back and rewatch, but it's, I enjoyed it, and I hope that there's a version that I want to see, like that existential dread of seeing yourself in a snuff film. I kind of want to see that movie. So,
or you could write it.
There you go. Or I could write it. I gotta do some thinking. But I enjoyed this. I'd give it a yay. What about you, Mike?
I am also firmly a yay. I do also really love like a good analog horror film. I love the detective work that they do through, like what would have it been at the time, like cutting edge technology that is so quaint now, and it's sort of like really adorable in retrospect, even though it's like a horrific subject matter. And I think that there's just a lot of things about it that it really excels, and I think it's like a very, like, especially for like, I think this was his debut. I think that it really has a lot going for it. The only thing for me is that the kind of whodunit aspect of it, which was sort of the backbone of the movie, was just, like I said, I agree with Ro. It just was a little bit weak to me. I didn't really care. Like, I just could sort of see everything, all the little twists coming from like a mile away. It wasn't offensively so. Like, I still went like, oh yeah, I can see how in 1996 you wouldn't have been so jaded as to having seen like 8 Scream movies and, whatever, and every slasher movie that ever existed. So, you could kind of go along for the ride a bit more. I was really waiting for the killer to be, like, the mom. I don't know why. I was like, but that's, like, the sort of thing that, like, a Giallo would pull out of its hat.
Yeah, you were expecting for the big twist because it was too
Yeah,
obvious.
like a really big twist. It was just so... For it to be one of them, I was like, okay, whatever. But like, that didn't distract the movie. Was just well done enough that it was definitely a solid yay. I really love a good academic themed horror or thriller as well. It was a little bit too long, and it didn't quite push some of the ideas that I wished it did. But yeah, I just thought it was extremely entertaining and very well done. I thought the actors were great. It had a couple of really great scenes. It had a chase scene, which we don't get anymore. So yeah, I think there's a lot to recommend for this movie. And again, I don't know that I'll watch it again anytime soon, but like if they put out like a really special edition on Blu-ray or something, I'd probably maybe think about picking it up if it went on sale. I'm not like Ro. I don't pick up everything. So to me, that's like a really good sign. So yeah, totally yay.
I give
love
this
it. It's
movie
not
a
slay,
nay.
though.
I can't wait to pick up the Blu-ray.
Yeah,
that's you.
Literally Ro's story. But yeah, what do you give it, Ro? Like let's get with it here. Like what's
so I'm not going to make this a unanimous yay episode. I think I'm gonna give it an okay, but it'd be on the stronger okay side. There was lots of stuff, like I said, that I did enjoy about the film. Obviously, some of my favorite parts were just looking at the posters and all the shirts and everything in the background, which I don't know if that says a lot about your movie, if that's my favorite thing about it, is the decor. But, I didn't hate this. I did find it was kind of a slog to get through. I checked my phone a couple times. And I was just like, yeah, like I'm kind of ready for this to be over. I don't want to say I wouldn't watch it again, because I think it was good enough. I would give it another opportunity to, maybe knock my socks off on a second watch at some point. But I kept getting so many Giallo vibes with it that I was like, oh, I could think about, 20 or 30 Giallos I'd much rather just watch than watch this. That would kind of give me everything I needed, kind of like what we talked about, that would give me like, the murder mixed with sex, mixed with like some crazy ass twist that doesn't make any sense, but still just makes me laugh. And but it's also good for all the reasons we said, like all the kind of tactile, analog feel of it. You're pretty much not going to get an A from me if you are including those kind of things that, make me smile, get the Walkmans going. I don't know. I always see guys on Facebook Marketplace selling, like Sony Walkmans, the Shock Walkmans. I might have to buy one or something.
Oh, yeah. You could drop that shit And
I know they're trying to
playing.
bring cassette tapes back. I don't know who would ever want to do that. As someone that lived in the cassette tape era, like, it was terrible. They just always like...
Yeah, the market is literally only going to be children who were not alive when they were originally a thing and don't know how fucking awful they are. They're like, records are cool, so are cassettes. No, they're not.
I'm going on the record
as saying cassettes are not cool.
The only market for them is people that collect records and would buy Thesis on Blu-ray. So maybe me.
Yeah, fair enough. Know. So you. Yeah. You're that person. We knew you were that person.
So yeah, I'm gonna give it an okay, but yeah, like I said, it's pretty strong okay. Like this is something I would probably revisit in a couple years and see if I'd bump it higher. But yeah, I don't know. I just didn't really connect with it. So 2 yays and an okay for Thesis. So we told you what we thought about the movie, and we asked you, what did you think about Thesis? And no one replied. No one replied on Thesis.
No.
But
honestly, I figured that was going to be the case.
I did get one private message that is okay for me to read on here. By Horror Hound Holly P.
Okay.
She wrote me, and she definitely heard that this was the movie and went and watched it because she messaged me on Friday and said, Thesis, 2 hours of my life I won't get back. And then
That's so funny.
And then just wrote Colton in capital letters with exclamation marks.
Called out.
Oh, no.
Called
and then wrote
the
not a horror movie.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, is she wrong? Absolutely not.
But
no,
like, the
she
whole
did
time
say
I was
she
thinking,
can't
I was
wait.
like,
She said she can't wait for the episode, to hear the episode on it.
To be fair, I had a misconception of what this movie was. And I think my idea winds up being a horror movie. This winds up being like a psychological thriller. I just didn't figure
I thought it was going to be a Ring type movie. Like, I literally thought it was you watch this snuff film and you die because somebody kills
which
you. Like,
also
everybody
would
that
have been
watches
horror.
it. Yeah, because I watched the first half hour of it on Friday before I fell asleep because, again, it took me till midnight to get it going. And last night I actually went out hilariously with an old classmate of mine and one of my old professors who ended up being my mentor. So we were just having a couple drinks and chatting, and I was telling him how we were recording on this movie tonight and explaining it to him. And I said, I think that it's going to be about this snuff film that people watch and then they die, kind of like The Ring.
Yeah,
because I had just watched up until shortly after they watched the film. So he had all these ideas because and it's funny enough, he's a film professor.
Of course,
that's how I met him, in a film class. So we were like throwing all these ideas around. You know, we were having a few drinks and like just chatting, and the things that he was saying, like, oh, like this and that and all these ideas he had actually ended up being more interesting than what the movie turned out to be.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of funny that I was like living this other movie in my head last night while I was having a couple glasses of gin that ended up like not being anything like what I ended up watching.
But yeah, I wound up very much feeling the same as Holly when I was watching. I was like, I don't know if this is really a horror movie. It just wound up being on the episode. I was like, we've had that discussion so many times about movies we pick.
Usually
that I was like, yeah, I mean, most of the time Mike picks, but hey, I just accidentally did it as well, so it happens. But
you pulled a mic.
I figured we might as well not open up that can of worms and have the same discussion over again.
Yeah.
So maybe Holly, I mean, look in the future. I was kind of thinking, I've kind of been thinking of fun gimmicky things for next year, and I kind of thought about like themed months. So
I agree. I'm actually on board with this. We've never discussed this, but I'm on board.
I've been thinking about it the last like 2 years. So look out for I don't know, maybe September, which I think it'd be a fun month. September, snuff month. We just we'll watch some snuff movies and review them. Yeah, so definitely
just absolutely horrific, movies that just traumatize.
So Ro just has to go over to his movie collection on his bookshelf.
Yeah. We're gonna be choosing The Faces of Death, and that's what we'll be watching.
So let's kick it over to the horrific hotline. As always, we have a call. So let's kick it over there. See what Nicolas is saying.
Hello, it's me again. This time for Thesis. And after, I think, 2 or 3 movies that were a nay for me, I'm glad to report that I definitely have a yay movie.
Woo!
Maybe
shit. Nice.
Not sure. Well, I guess more of a yay, because I do think the movie overstays its welcome a bit with its runtime of over 2 hours. But that is the, well, most negative thing, because the rest of the movie is very thrilling and entertaining. I do think it handles the topic way better than the similarly themed, 8mm, starring Nicolas Cage.
I actually haven't seen that.
The
Don't bother.
very haunting scene in the tunnels or in the cellar of the university was something I did not expect me to scare as much as it did. And overall, I just think this is a brilliant combination of, actually more of a thriller crime movie with horror elements, which just fit perfectly together. So overall, very great movie. Really enjoyed it. So thanks for picking that one.
Well, I'm glad he enjoyed it, and I didn't continue his streak of nays. But yeah, no, I actually haven't seen 8mm, but that's another one that's been on my radar, but now maybe a little bit further down the list if it's not as good as this one. Have either of you guys seen 8mm?
I saw it like shortly after it came out.
Yeah, same here. I don't really remember it. I think I own it on VHS and Blu-ray. I've just never rewatched it. But I mean, Thesis should also cast a Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage is good in anything. Just put him in this one.
Listen, and that was like the height of Nicolas Cage like fever. When he was like, pure Hollywood. So, nothing produced out of that system about snuff movies is going to be good.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's fair.
I'm just happy that we didn't open the voicemail and it just didn't start with Colton.
Yeah. Exclamation point.
I'm just glad we never opened the voicemail and it was just a weird tape of Nicholas screaming and being tortured.
Oh, here comes the chainsaw.
But yeah, if you want to be like Nicholas and leave us a voicemail, you can do so at 1-902-418-8620. I don't know. We should probably just retire that number because no one does it that way anyways. So you can just send us a voicemail via social media at It's Lay's Podcast, or send us, it to us via email at itslayspodcast@gmail.com. Basically, if you find a way to get us the voicemail, we'll ensure that it makes the show. And as Rowan said last time, it doesn't actually have to be on the movie that we're reviewing. You can just, leave us a question, a comment on a previous movie we reviewed, anything you want. We'll play it on the show and discuss. And if you're not doing so already, you can follow us on all of our socials at It's Lay's Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, which I'm not on there yet, but and also I guess
if I get another Blue Sky invite, I'll make an account for us.
Yeah, maybe we'll be on Blue Sky soon. Twitter is no longer Twitter; it's now X apparently. Which it's
still Twitter for me. I'm not updating my app.
Mine turned to X today, and it's just awful. But
no,
yeah, we're there at It's Lay's Podcast. Give us a follow if you're using that and you see us around. And if you want to support the show, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Steven, Joy, and Caravi, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams, hosted by Jill, and get episodes of this here main show 48 hours early. Be sure to head on over to patreon.com/It's Lay's Podcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Now, Rowan, it's your time. Go ahead and plug the playlist.
So if you're in this spooky music, go to the It's Lay's Podcast horrific playlist on Spotify. If you have any problems finding it, go to any of the social media Colton just talked about. Go to the Linktree link, and there's a button right there. Click on it. It will open it up for you on Spotify. We upload licensed and scores from horror movies we review, or iconic horror movies, or just horror movies we love. We might have to look, see if there's any Thesis music on Spotify or anything. Cause yeah, some of the score was pretty good on this. But yeah, go there, get your spooky music on, cause why the hell not? And all that is really left is for us to announce our next episode, and it is my pick, and we are going to do, I feel like a classic kind of for anyone our age.
And weirdly enough, I was going to say that it actually came up on the show a time or two today as well.
Yes, very oddly.
So, yeah.
So we're going to be doing I Know What You Did Last Summer. Yeah, I'm excited to get into this. So make sure to get your eyeballs on I Know What You Did Last Summer, and we will be back in 2 weeks. So, as always, thank you for the support. I am your humble host, Rowan.
Bye, it's Mike.
I'm Colton, and I'm sorry, Holly. I'll do better next time. Pick an actual horror movie.
See you later.
We're going to expand our weekly video segment to take you into the back shelves of your local video store, back where it says horror videos, and where kids are devouring some awful films that we call the video nasties.
Are you freebasing? Inquiring minds want to know.
I have to break free from this culture of mechanical reproductions and the thick incrustations dying on the surface.
From the prime time, bitch!
Along with the new Fletch.
The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, come with me and be immortal.
We have such sights to show you.
Gotta return some videotapes.